Beyoncé, even though she's, I guess, one of the biggest music stars ever, I find her music to be awful, unlistenable.
Same.
And just, quite honestly, just noise. It's not music. It's disgusting.
Yep. Can you believe that Charlie Kirk openly trashed the work of one of the biggest pop icons in the world, calling Beyoncé's music not just not his taste, but trash, unlistenable noise, and disgusting? I mean, that's way more than simply saying, I don't vibe with her. It was a full-on dismissal. But you know what? When he decided to come for Queen Bey, to many folks, it was not just his usual culture war ranting. To them, it was yet another example of how his attacks always seem to land hardest on women, people of color, and marginalized voices. Basically, this conversation hasn't just been about Beyoncé at all. It sparked a much wider debate about Charlie Kirk's entire legacy, his rhetoric, and how he arguably helped cement the rage and division that seems to define the United States today. People are saying Kirk didn't just swim in this toxic stew of outrage politics. He helped cook it, stir it, and then sold it for profit. While we can acknowledge that the way he died was wrong on many levels, many insist we must also acknowledge that Kirk's legacy of bigotry, sexism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, and derogatory comments about people of color has been well documented. The receipts, as they say, are everywhere.
And Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhere.
Live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete
example. He once claimed that Joy Reid, Michelle Obama, Sheila Jackson Lee, and Ketanji Brown Jackson were all simply affirmative action picks. According to him, they didn't have the intellectual capacity to be taken seriously on their own merit. In his words, you had to go steal a white person's slot just to be taken somewhat seriously. Statements like that were classic Kirk, provocative, offensive, and designed to get a reaction. Then there were his views on guns. He once said, without flinching, that it was worth it to have a certain number of gun deaths every year just so the Second Amendment could protect other rights. According to him, that was a prudent deal. Who even talks like this? Critics argued that he lived in a completely alternate universe, one where constant outrage was both currency and strategy. Now, of course, the story took a darker turn when Charlie Kirk, the well-known conservative activist and staunch ally of Donald Trump, was lived at Utah Valley University. Witnesses described a truly horrific scene. He was speaking outdoors to a crowd of roughly 3,000 people, part of a 15-stop nationwide tour organized by Turning Point USA, the group he co-founded. Then suddenly, while answering audience questions, Kirk clutched his neck, blood gushing, before collapsing from his chair. Reports later revealed the shot came from the Lucy Center rooftop, about 140 yards away, well within the range of most rifles. In other words, this wasn't random. It looked professional. He was rushed to a hospital, but later died. Immediately, Trump posted online calling Kirk great and even legendary, framing him as a martyr for truth and freedom. Utah's governor even called the killing a political assassination. But here's where the debate blew up. While some mourned him, many others on social media argued Kirk didn't deserve sympathy. Their reasoning? He had built his brand by showing blatant disregard for marginalized groups. And receipts were brought forward quickly. Take his words about Black women again. On his show, he ridiculed Joy Reid, Michelle Obama, Sheila Jackson Lee, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, saying affirmative action was the only reason they had reached their positions. This argument fell apart fast when critics pointed out these women's academic records: Harvard, Princeton, Yale, UVA Law, NYU. Compare that to Kirk himself, who attended Harper College for one semester before dropping out. Yet he had the audacity to say these highly accomplished women lacked the brain processing power to succeed without affirmative action. And it didn't stop there. At one point, he literally said, "If I'm dealing with somebody in customer service who's a moronic black woman, I wonder, is she there because of her excellence or because of affirmative action?" Comments like that cemented his reputation as someone who openly demeaned minorities. He also dipped into dangerous territory with comments about black athletes, lesbians, and even pilots. In one infamous moment, Kirk said, "If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified." Critics rightly slammed this as not just racist but reckless, since it sowed mistrust in entire professions. And when asked about this later by a black attendee at one of his events, he doubled down, saying he was just pointing out the reality created by the left.
It's very obvious to us you are not smart enough to be able to get it on your own. I could not make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving.
We know. It's very obvious to us that you were not smart enough to be able to get it on your own. I couldn't make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. You know, this is how arrogant Joy Reid and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee are. They're so narcissistic, they think this is persuasive. They think we're like, oh, of course. That's why we need affirmative action, because you have impressed us with your brilliance. Of course. Oh no, imagine the world without Joy Reid. Imagine the world without Sheila Jackson Lee or Michelle Obama or Ketanji Brown Jackson. They think this is persuasive. They think as they kind of now reveal that I'm only here because of anti-white, anti-Asian forced discrimination policies. That turned me into a bitter, resentful activist that hates white people, honestly, through.
He didn't spare Martin Luther King Jr. either, calling him awful and saying America had made a huge mistake passing the Civil Rights Act. And on gender issues, his views were just as controversial. When asked in a debate whether he would support his 10-year-old daughter terminating a pregnancy conceived through rape, he said, "The answer is yes, the baby would be delivered." His anti-abortion stance was so extreme that it shocked even some conservatives. He also had a habit of going after celebrities. When Taylor Swift got married, he mocked her career choices, saying she should reject feminism and submit to her husband. According to him, she should have more kids than she has houses, and her late prioritization of marriage was a poor example for young women. On immigration, he pined for the days when America had halted immigration for 40 years, claiming the country was at its peak during that era. He insisted the Democratic Party hates America and is working to replace white rural America. He even ventured into Islamophobia, claiming Islam is not compatible with Western civilization and calling Islam the sword the left is using to slit the throat of America. So when he trashed Beyoncé, many people saw it as just another example in a long pattern. To them, it wasn't about her music at all. It was about how Kirk consistently used his platform to elevate a vision of America as a white, Christian stronghold while belittling voices from other communities. Still, not everyone is writing him off. Some defenders argue that Kirk was simply unafraid to speak his mind, even if his words were uncomfortable. Comedian Terrence K. Williams, for example, blasted Kirk's critics, saying, "Charlie Kirk was not the R-word."
Want to go thought crime? Like, I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Well, that's the
you
game
wouldn't have
theory
done
I was
that.
talking
You
about.
wouldn't have. You wouldn't have done that before.
That's not an immediate.
No, you wouldn't
that's
have done
not
that
who I
before.
am. That's
No.
not what I believe.
It is the reality the left has
But
created.
And I will not sit back and allow people to spread that lie. Williams claimed Kirk personally paid for hundreds of young black people to attend a White House event in 2019, covering flights and hotels so they wouldn't miss out. For Williams, Kirk gave opportunities of a lifetime. And that's the tension in his legacy. On one side, you have an extensive record of inflammatory, often bigoted remarks that targeted women, people of color, immigrants, and LGBTQ+ communities. On the other side, you have allies and defenders who say he was generous, outspoken, and willing to challenge cultural idols. At the end of the day, the question becomes, how will history remember him? Was he a fearless truth-teller who refused to bow to pop culture pressure? Or was he simply another loud voice hiding bigotry behind hot takes? His swipe at Beyoncé wasn't just about music, it was about what he stood for. And now, with his sudden death cutting his career short, people are divided more than ever. So when you think about Charlie Kirk, are you siding with his defenders who say he spoke hard truths? Or are you shaking your head at yet another example of toxic commentary aimed at marginalized groups? The debate continues, and the question remains, was Charlie Kirk a martyr for freedom, or just a man whose words left behind a trail of division and pain? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.